Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to people calling in from all across the country and the world, and to our amazing audience right here at this beautiful WeWork location in San Francisco. I'm Kirtika Reddy. I am the CEO of a stealth mode Web3 startup. I'm here with my hats of being a WeWork board member as well as the co-founder of a social impact initiative called Ladder. Ladder's ambition is to reimagine the landscape for working women so that we can eliminate the motherhood penalty, because after all, women should not have to choose between having a thriving career and ambitious family goals. I see huge nods right here and across. Absolutely. And I think this conversation at the heels of the Gates Foundation report that gender equality is going to take 100 years more to achieve, this conversation is more important now than ever. So it's certainly not in my lifetime, which again is disturbing, but I think it behooves all of us to do all that we can to shorten the runway. Quick background on Ladder. Ladder started with being a resource library where it helps women at every stage, whether they're a young adult, all through the empty nester phase, to find the resources that they need to not have to choose. You will find videos from working parents and everyone who goes there. You will find something that educates you, inspires you, and helps your day and your ambitions come more easily. And we're very, very excited to also feature the amazing set of organizations across the globe, many of whom are sitting right here with us, and helping women discover the resources that are available to achieve your ambition. We just launched on Women's Equality Day, a Ladder Talent Hub, which is focused on flex work, and WeWork is a valued partner. I want to do a huge call out for the CEO, Sandeep Mathrani, CEO of WeWork. When I started talking to him about Ladder and we started talking about space, and by the way, there is a space discount ongoing right now, so you can get all access with the code LADDER50. You can find that on the Ladder webpage as well, laddrr.com. And it offers like 50% off space for 3 months. So we started talking about space, but he said, let's go one step further. Let's talk about flex work. And that was a big part of their partnership on the Talent Hub. So to all of our male allies and to everyone at the forefront of this change, a huge thank you. We need this even more than ever. And without further ado, I am so delighted to hand this over to this incredible panel, Career Pivot, and Anne Choquette, CEO founder of TheLi.st.
Thank you.
And over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think I'm mic'd. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Anne Choquette. I am the CEO of TheLi.st, which is a network of high-impact women who are devoted to helping each other achieve and succeed, and frankly, for helping all women achieve and succeed. Thank you, Kritika, for the amazing introduction and the work you're doing with Ladder. And thank you to WeWork for hosting us and for being our partner here today. And thank you all, frankly, for spending your lunch hour with us, because it's hard to find time to have a meaningful conversation about the specific challenges of being I say it in quotes, a working mother, and finding a career that works with your life, and a job that works with your life, and a life that works with your job. And I want to thank all of the folks who are watching us on live stream right now for spending your hours with us. There's a Q&A box. And so please, as we go, put your Q&A in. I've got an iPad right here. I will read your questions towards the end of this session, but I want to quickly introduce our panel and then set the stage for where we are, the state of the union for working mothers. So let me start down the end here. We have Lisa Stromberg, who is the CEO and co-founder of Prismwork and the author of Work, Pause, Thrive, which is a guide for working, pausing, and thriving in your life. We have Sam Edis, who is looking amazing. Now, Sam is the CEO and founder of Park Place Payments. and we're going to talk about Park Place at a stage of this, but I first got to know Sam when she was the author of The Pie Life, and we actually did our TED Talk together. So if you're there, look up Sam's TED Talk from a couple of years ago. All right, and we have Archana Gilravi, who SVP of Lean In, which I think everyone out there, everyone in this room also knows. I want to frame the conversation today to give a little bit of a state of a union of why we are having this conversation. 2 million women are missing from the workforce because of the pandemic. These are women who were forced to make the decision between caring for their families and having a career or a job. And this is not, it's very often framed as the Great Resignation, right? We're talking about, oh, everybody's resigning and looking for a better job. This was a Great Resignation out of need, right? Not out of duress. This was not for many women. This was not a privileged choice. This was a choice between taking care of your family or putting your efforts towards a company that maybe didn't accommodate you and your family. And now the new conversation that everybody's talking about is this idea of quiet quitting, which is basically you're doing your job and not doing more than you are getting paid for. And then that is being perceived that you are opting out of your ambition. So the groundwork here is pretty shaky. We are in a pretty strange time when we talk about the state of work and the state of ambition for women. Frankly, the state of ambition for women, I've never seen a more ambitious moment than I am seeing right now. But I am seeing that work is not stepping up. Companies are not stepping up to meet their ambition where they are. So, all right, we've set the stage. Oh, I have one more note. All of this is on top of federal paid leave, which does not exist yet. We do not have paid leave for all. So exactly the reason that so many people are forced to make that choice. All right. Archana, I'm going to start with you. Because so much of this conversation about women and ambition was sparked by the conversation around Lean In and the work that you have done. And you've really been at the forefront of sort of road mapping what is happening for women in the workplace in your annual report. And thank you for that, because I think the way that you have given light to so many complicated issues, we appreciate that. And I appreciate that in every way. This year, we can talk about last year. Last year was burnout.
Yeah, I have some stuff for last year.
We want to talk about last year. So talk about this. I've just painted a really dark picture of the state of work for women. But you tell me that we have reason to be optimistic.
Yeah.
So tell me about, like, what are the pockets of light and brightness that you are hearing? Like, what is giving you, what is making you feel supported and, bright possibility on the horizon?
Well, I think there was a new jobs report that came out this morning that I do think shows that women are kind of re-entering into the workforce, which is great. And I wish I had the stats at my fingertips to share that. So I saw that this morning on the way out to kind of be here. And so I was like, oh, okay, that's good. But on the Lean In side, so one of the things that we do that a lot of people don't know is that we actually work with a lot of companies to help bring our programming in to support their DEI efforts. And I joined Lean In 4 years ago. So I would say about even 4 years ago, kind of like 4 or 5 years ago, when we were talking to companies, we were talking to like one woman who was maybe running like a business unit, was like an individual contributor or a manager. And she was like, I want a circle and I need support. Like, Lean In, can you help me? And so we were kind of in one small pocket, trying to talk, and these women were amazing. And so they started to build like networks of circles within their organizations. Fast forward to today, we are talking to the CHRO, we're talking to the head of DE&I, we're talking to the right folks at the senior leadership level who are deeply caring about wanting to make their workplaces work for women, and working with Lean In to talk to us like, hey, how do we do that? What are the policies that we need to have in place? What are the programs, Lean In, that you can help bring to us so that we can actually create that culture and kind of create that change. And WeWork is one of those companies. We work very closely with WeWork on some of their DEI programming. So that gives me kind of like reason to feel a little bit more optimistic. I think companies are starting to embrace remote work. I think there's like a huge range on that.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's being enabled as a result of this is that companies are able to recruit from a much wider area of the US. And so when you think about lucrative tech jobs, you don't have to be living in San Francisco or New York or Seattle, but companies are reaching out to like even in Pittsburgh and in Miami and all these other areas that really weren't available before. You really have to think about relocating. And so I think that's creating some diversity in the pipeline, both from a gender standpoint as well as from a race standpoint. That's very positive. So those are my 2 pockets that I can start with.
Is it only tech companies that are embracing remote work?
I think I'm biased because I'm based in the Bay Area, and so that's the data point that I have. But I'm sure that there are others, and happy to have others share about that.
Yeah, Sam, talk about
Yeah.
remote work is like.
I was just going to
change.
say, yesterday or 2 days ago, I gave a speech in the South to a very conservative law firm about the future of work. And what was incredible was that almost their entire team works remotely at least 1+ days a week, which is astounding. And so if they're doing it, I feel like everyone's doing it. They're probably the last of, the people. So
I mean, a lot of people didn't have a choice, right? A lot of companies, they didn't have a choice in the last year, but the choice is now whether or not you're going to embrace it, make it part of your culture moving forward.
Well, this example I'll just give you, this law firm has hired 123 attorneys last year. And that is not because there were any new positions. They were replacing 123 attorneys.
Oh.
So companies are having such a hard time keeping employees that they're being forced to come up with policies that work for people. And so that's actually why I'm so optimistic right now for women, is because I feel like there's never been a better time to be a woman in the workforce, or to be, I should say.
Say it again.
There has never been a better time to be a woman in the workforce. I really believe that, because the flexibility we've been begging for and talking about for years is finally here, and it's not for us. That's the best part, is that it's not just for women, it's for everyone.
Yes.
And so when there's flexibility for everyone, it trickles down to helping the people that needed it most, no matter who they are.
It
And so,
destigmatizes the need for
100%.
flexibility.
And so working parents are the winners here. So I think it's a really great time to be a working parent.
Because one of the challenges when we talked about the motherhood penalty, right? The penalty comes from, let's not call Melissa for this project. I know she's got other commitments, or there's going to be a lot of late nights on this one. Let's see if Jim can do it.
Exactly.
Jim's the guy with no kids, and like,
Or
he can pull his, right. And so the idea that when we stop calling it maternity leave, right, we call it parental leave, or we stop thinking that flexibility is just for the working mothers. But I mean, there was a report that I talked about in the live stream, a Wall Street Journal report that I talked about in the live stream on Tuesday, which showed that companies are really dialing back all of those pandemic gains that they had given to maternity leave, but they're dialing back paternity leave even more. So anyway, we would like everybody to get the message that the leave for all, the policies for all, are good for all. I'm so happy that you are out there giving the speeches, making the noise about this.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the policies have not caught up, right? As you mentioned earlier, paid leave. I mean, it's abhorrent that we don't even have these things. However, just in general, we were all kind of sold a bill of goods many years ago that we had to be at our desks. You couldn't be productive if you weren't right there, if someone wasn't micromanaging you. And now we've gotten away from micromanagement to a productivity-based workplace, which is so much better for all of us.
I mean, that I am the ultimate champion for millennials who are like ushering in this change, have been demanding flexibility and transparency and diversity. And so I'm actually happy to see that as millennials grow and step into their power, that we get to benefit from some of those things that sort of traditional senior leadership has kind of rolled their eyes at. That, like, you need to see them in the office. You don't need to see them in the office. I think it's great. Leeson, your book is about this work-life balance, integration. Now, Leeson, I want to say for the record, is also tremendously optimistic about where we are going from here. Will you talk about that on the life side?
Well, let's start with, we've proven that we can actually work in a different way. And that was the shock. No one believed it was possible. We talked about flexibility. We talked about kind of all of this. It happened. And it happened in about 2.5 weeks, people. So the truth of the matter is we've been able to prove that we can actually change how we work. Now we have to change our attitudes towards work. And we're seeing that in our consulting work every day. We see that with our clients. The leaders are finally realizing, oh, we can be productive. We can actually accomplish what we need to do. And it doesn't mean that we all have to be sitting in the same place right next to each other, right? We can get stuff done. And we can do it in a way that supports all of us. And that's, as you have said so beautifully, not just a support for working parents, but for support for all of us, whether you have children or not, or whatever caregiving responsibilities. You have a dog, you like to run marathons, whatever. Our shift in the mindset of actually being able to say, I support you to get work done. We're going to, as a team, design an alliance that works for us. And we're seeing more of this team-focused, designed alliances around how work gets done and what work happens when it gets done. And that, to me, makes me incredibly optimistic.
I'm very.
And it's not, to your point, sorry for interrupting, it's not a women's issue. It's a let's get work done issue.
Yeah.
We don't even talk about flexibility because that's so 2019.
It is.
Right? It's like, let's just get our work done.
All right. Well, so what you're doing now with Prism Work is focusing on research, right? And so if that's 2019, what's 2022? What's 2023? What's the next thing that we need to see over the horizon?
Well, so our research last year was focused on women of color in the workplace and what are women of color needing? What are they saying? Arshana, both of you were on a panel.
That's what put us all in the same room together.
Yeah, talking about kind of what are we seeing and what's happening. And that was amazing. It was in partnership with the Billie Jean King Foundation and Information. And
let's give a props to Deepa Prushotham.
Oh my gosh, Deepa.
Deepa, are you out there?
Yes.
I hope that you're watching this.
Yes. And her partner, Ra, who started Information. But we asked ourselves, what is happening? Where are we not seeing movement? And does anyone have a guess of where we're not seeing movement? Men, right? What is happening? We're seeing actually men pull back, get afraid. They're afraid they're going to be canceled because they're afraid they're going to be called racist or sexist. They don't know how to show up. We've just launched, with the support of the Kellogg Foundation, a landmark study on what men are experiencing right now. There's research, 3 or 4 or 5 years old, but today's research, with today's reality in the workplace, we don't have that. So we've just finished our first set of roundtables, and we're launching on Monday our quantitative study. But I can tell you the words that keep coming back to me. I want to be a good man. I don't know what that means. I need the rules. What are the new rules of the road? What's the toolkit? And how do I show up? And so for me, I think when we can actually stop separating and actually stop integrating so women and men benefit together, it's all going to be a better place.
I mean, we've talked so much about burnout and isolation. I'm sure that men are feeling that too, maybe even more so because not all of us, but a lot of us have deep networks of women that we can turn to, the list communities at WeWork, now Ladder, to support us. So I imagine that is the case. However, let's go back to this idea of feeling burnt out, feeling isolated, feeling exhausted. That was some of the conversation that the three of us had earlier this year. Lean In last year, the big number was around this post-pandemic burnout. Can we talk about what are the lingering effects for women, particularly women who are being stressed at home, stressed at work, and can't even find time for themselves?
Yeah, so I think there's two things that was really interesting from last year's research. One was that 42% of women reported that they were feeling almost always or just always burnt out. And that was more than kind of the first year of the pandemic. And the gap between men and women actually doubled. So a year and a half into the pandemic, women are being like, hey, I'm super stressed out. On top of that, what we were seeing is that companies were starting to kind of awaken to the DEI movement and saying, okay, this is important. But women were the ones doing all of the work, and in particular, women of color. So on top of feeling more burnout, a lot of stress, high levels of exhaustion, women were showing up better than men were when it came to people managers, to being a people manager. And I think being a people manager during COVID was really taxing. Like you really had to flex a lot of your empathy skills on kind of understanding the whole person and how do you support individuals that are going through a lot during COVID. And women were also taking the brunt of doing the DEI work. So they're showing up as better people managers, they're putting in more time, and then they're doing all the DEI work. And the sad thing is that they're not getting any credit for it. They're not getting promoted. They're not getting raises.
Are they
They're not getting
paid?
bonuses. They're not getting paid more.
Please, can we start paying those? Please.
And so,
Can we start paying the women who are running your ERGs?
Exactly. LinkedIn actually did, and we do as well at Lean In for those who are running the ERGs. LinkedIn actually gives a substantial amount because that's, I mean, you've got 10,000 women in their women's ERG. Like that is also a full-time job on top of your full-time job.
Can we give them budgets, not just for wine and cheese, but budgets for bringing in
Real
speakers?
budgets.
This is my own. This is my own platform, but like budgets for speakers, budgets for programming, budgets for workshops. Pay them. Give them a budget.
Exactly. And so that was kind of a really disturbing trend that we saw last year. And it'll be interesting to see kind of like, did that change this year? But that, yes. So I forgot your original question.
Well, that's about burnout.
I want to build off of what you said,
do.
because one of your great research, and then we actually saw this in even deeper. When we did the Power Redefined research, we saw that white women were burnt out. Women of color were traumatized.
Yeah.
The intersectional reality that we're all burnt out, and then add to that the microaggressions, the challenges. That to us was sort of heartbreaking, and I know you probably experienced that in the research that you saw.
We did,
too.
yeah. I think that's great, Lisa. And I think the sad part is that women of color were facing the same number and the same frequency and the same types of microaggressions that they were even pre-COVID.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was really disturbing.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So.
All of that is a thread that we've really focused on at the list around loneliness and around how do you find the support that you need in your job, in your career. But Sam Edis has created so much of that support. Will you talk for a moment about the spark behind Park Place and what you're doing to support women and to give them the support they need to have control over their careers and their lives?
Well, when you and I first met, Anne, it was TEDx Women St. Louis, and I was on book tour for my book, The Pie Life, and the group of women that I was talking to that I couldn't help were the women who left the workforce and couldn't get back in. So they left for, let's say, 2 years to raise kids and couldn't get back in. My book was all about like a positive framework for why you never have to leave. Like when you'll be happier and more fulfilled if you somehow, keep your foot in the door the whole time. But there were a lot of women who already made the choice to leave and then couldn't get back. And so I felt so frustrated in only being able to motivate them with rhetoric, but not having any real solutions. And so I decided to create a company that would actually solve some of their problems. I'd seen so many really talented, educated women selling for multi-level marketing companies like the modern day, I'm not going to name them right now, but the modern day Avons of the world. And when I dug into it, 98% of them were actually losing money. They weren't even breaking even because those companies always have someone holding the bag of inventory at the end. I'd also seen this industry that was totally male dominated and pretty dishonest. And it was an industry most people don't know that much about, but we interact with every day. And it was the credit card processing industry.
I loved when you said, like, who are those guys on those yachts over there?
Right, exactly. I'd been, in one of my speaking things, I'd been on this trip that was like a boondoggle for the top guys in the industry. They'd all shown up on private planes. One was less impressive and less educated than the next. And I said, where are the women? Where are the people of color? And they laughed at me and said, there are none in this industry. And that was like 10 or 15 years ago. And I was like, one day I'm going to come back and crush these guys. Like the former child athlete in me was like, I'm going to come back and get them.
Yeah, I want to be on this yacht with you. I would like, can I have my yacht next to yours?
Right. I mean, so I just felt so like, okay, these are all the middlemen. So basically any business that accepts credit cards, whether it's a doctor's office or a hair salon, has a middleman between Amex, MasterCard, Visa, and the business. And that middleman was basically a lot of kind of used car salesman-esque men. So that's what we've disrupted. That's our first financial services product. Now we are branching out to other financial services products as well. We have a sales force of over 1,300 freelancers. I would love to say that I was a fortune teller and I knew that the whole world would be freelance, but I didn't. I originally started this for moms who left the workforce. Now that is not our demographic at all. That's a small portion of it. Now it's just the fact that everyone wants a side hustle or a full-time gig or whatever it is. We have a freelance revolution. So Park Place has been really well positioned to capitalize on that. So now we have, anyone who's been a victim of ageism, sexism, racism, homophobia, gender inequality, we're like, come on board. We want you. We'll train you for free and you can sell financial services to your local businesses.
I mean, I think that's actually the point about ageism is really an important piece of this conversation because there's a piece of this that says you can't pause because when you come back, you'll be too old, or you're like, you paused at the top of your career when you're on your way up the ladder, and then you'll have to start lower down, or I can't get back, or I can't make the money, or like, oh, I'm like so out of the game, I don't even know what the technology, whatever is. And I think that first of all, what I love in your story is that you saw the opportunity. And so many of us would have said like, oh, that's an interesting opportunity. But like Sam Edis made it happen. I admire you so much for that. But also, like, that's a spirit that we could all take away with us, is that like, there is possibility, there is opportunity. It's not too late. You're not too old. You're not too young. You're not too pregnant. You don't have too many, like, there are ways to look at a situation to like use an old phrase, like, abundance, to see the abundance and possibilities in freelance work rather than feeling diminished by the moment.
I mean, to your point, I do think in terms of opportunity, this is like the Wild West, right? Like, we've never seen a more seismic change in the workforce in our entire lifetime. So the last 3 years, everything has just been turned on its head. And that means that for all of you, that's an opportunity, right? That means that you can redefine yourself. You can start a new chapter, a new story. There's a world of opportunity, and it's no longer looking at someone's resume. I mean, how old-fashioned does it seem to look at a resume and be like, well, you spent 5 years at such and such. Like, that is like thrown out the window, and now it's a whole new world. And I think that we don't even know what's going to be in this world in 5 years. It's just constantly changing.
Well, and I think you're so well said around this, because when I wrote my book and it came out in 2017, we didn't have solutions like this. We didn't have Ladder. We didn't have anything. The whole rise of return to work, or return to returnships, if you will, literally did not exist. They were just beginning to get. So we're seeing some significant changes. The other thing we're seeing is pausing isn't just about caregiving. It's about anything. It's about COVID. It's about whatever. And so we're seeing a mindset shift on hiring managers who are willing to say, oh, tell me about that pause. LinkedIn, you can now actually say stay-at-home parent. We didn't have that option. So we're becoming more transparent about our choices and more empowered around our choices. And that to me is very inspiring.
Lisa, will you, out there on our live stream, will you talk about the recruiters and the hiring managers? Will you just give them a little bit of like how they can also see possibilities and open their minds and change because they are in so many ways the gatekeepers.
It's true. And actually, it's not just them as individuals, it's the technology around it. The technology boots out a pause in your career. So it's very frustrating. And we saw that again and again. And the recruiters themselves are, it's hard, right? This is the framework that they're asked to deliver on. And it's the hiring manager who has to inform the recruiter, be creative. I want that creative approach, and be willing to look at diverse talent and diverse background. So it's not just, I don't want to just blame the recruiters. They're doing as best as they can. And I can't tell you how many I speak to, and they say, I tried to present, 5 different diverse candidates, and the hiring manager wouldn't tolerate it. So it's not a one-person problem, but the technology is an issue.
I think the technology is an issue. And then to build on that, I think, what are the company policies? I mean, the first thing that we say to company is, are you tracking? Like, how many women do you have at every step of your corporate ladder? How many women of color do you have? Are you tracking them? Do you have metrics around them? Are those metrics transparent to the organization? And so few companies do all of that. We're seeing that there's like an optimism and a reality, right? So that optimistically, we're seeing a much greater number of companies actually track their gender metrics. So now we're saying, okay, great. Track gender and race. And can you make those metrics transparent? And are you putting targets around that? And then are you holding leaders accountable? Because you can do all of those things, but if there's no carrot or stick for the hiring manager, there's no reason and there's no incentive to do that. And when you put that incentive, I tell you, with the companies that we talk to, as soon as that incentive goes in place and you are bonused on that, the numbers change pretty dramatically, and they change overnight. It is no longer hard in order to create a diverse workforce.
It needs to be your KPI. It needs to be a KPI in your pay.
Absolutely.
But what's really exciting with a number of our clients, we're sort of doing culture consulting with them, they're frustrated because they're trying to hire, and the millennials, God bless you millennials and Gen Z, you're like, I'm not going to work there unless you have a diversity story. What's your diversity story? How many women do you have?
Millennials.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, it is a major pain point that so many leaders are facing right now, and I'm thrilled.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Keep asking.
right.
Again, not just women. Men are asking the same question. Non-binary. Everybody's saying, what's your story? Why should I come to you? My talent is great. Where should I come? Where should I be?
And we're seeing that also from a policy standpoint.
Oh, yes.
Lena did some research after kind of Roe was overturned, and men and women, especially kind of like in the millennial category. And I guess I'm a part of it, so it feels a little weird to talk about it, but that's okay. Is that they're really caring about, as a company, like, what are your policies around this? Are you supporting this? Are you providing travel? Are you providing like legal support? What are your policies? And they're rethinking what states they want to be living in. And like, I think, yes, it comes from a bit of a privileged place in terms of like, hey, can you actually move states and all of that? However, people are thinking about it, and they're thinking deeply about it, and they're making decisions about it. And so as a company, if you're wanting to attract and retain talent, how are you responding to what's happening in the world?
It is so fascinating because we get called, and leaders will ask us, and then particularly male leaders, how do I show up on these kind of hot button topics? How do I show up in a way that's true for me, in a way that won't get me canceled? You know, I'm afraid, I'm anxious, and what do I do? And I love it because they're being called to really step up and take a stand, and authentically. Not be forced to, but take an authentic stand and say, here's what is true for me, and this is what our company's going to do. And it's a really, back to I loved your comment about the Wild West. We're in a Wild West at so many levels: the workplace, leadership, programs and policies.
Well, there's no roadmap for those men, right? So, I mean, you can also empathize with them. They have no idea. They've been tracked a certain way their whole lives. They were rewarded a certain way their whole lives. And so now that there's this upheaval, they don't even know and understand exactly where their place is. And to your point, Anne, earlier about isolation, I do think, like, although I'm saying it's, all Pollyanna and this is amazing, I do worry in general about two things. One is the isolation that's coming from, like, everyone's saying they want remote work, but do you really know what that's going to be like? Like, I miss being in the office with people. I can't even get my full-time team to come into the office one day a week. They don't want to come. But to me, even like one of my young people on the team, I always think about her like, how is she learning at a normal pace when she's not around or in the environment? So, and I think about my teenagers, like, will they enter the workforce from their home desk that's next to their bed in their studio apartment? Like, I don't really understand how that's healthy. Right. And right, exactly. But like, how's that healthy for them? So I think that we're, in many ways, the pendulum has to switch all the way to the other direction to then come to a middle ground. And I think that right now we're seeing the switch all the way, and then we'll see a place in the middle that works for everyone.
I mean, the list is jumping into that middle space. I mean, the truth is, I don't think I've seen you in person in 5 years. I haven't seen Leeson in person. I've never met you in person until last night. But the list and the community that we've built, I feel supported and seen, and know that I could like ping somebody and I think that really does help overcome the isolation in so many ways. I mean, I recognize that we are lucky to have the list. But I'm a huge proponent of the other ways that women can find community, that people can find community to feel supported even when it's on your phone, right? Even when it's in your email.
Can I build on that a little bit?
Yes.
I think the list is an amazing resource. I know I've really benefited from it. And I think that there are a lot of women's groups out there where you can find resource. And so I will make a plug, since I am from Lean In, is that Lean In started, like, our foundational program when we launched almost 10 years ago was Lean In Circles. It was the absolute premise that women can come together and provide peer level mentorship, because we were seeing that women weren't getting the mentors and the sponsors that they needed in the workplace. But there's a lot of data that shows that you can get a lot of power from just bringing women together and relying on your peers. And so if you are feeling lonely, kind of everyone out there in the ether, and you're looking for kind of like a group of women, Lean In Circles, and you can find one kind of literally anywhere in the world. We are in almost every single country, and start a circle. Just grab a couple of your friends, being like, we're going to start a circle. And we provide all of the support to do that, and it's all for free. And so I think that there is something there, whether it's Lean In or the list or any other women's network. There's so many out there.
You want to be
you want to be somewhere, and it is just so unbelievably powerful. both in terms of providing support during a time where you may be feeling a little bit more lonely, or during a time where you're trying to kind of rethink, do I want to pause? Do I want to step back in? Like, what do I want to do from a career standpoint in this pivot?
So much of this conversation has been around policy and change and work, and all of that is amazing. And yes, and I hope that everybody out there is like taking notes about what are your marching orders for the things that need to change. But the women who are listening and the women who are going to ladder need some personal lessons. And so I know that everybody on this panel has had their own like career pivot, career rethinking, resignation, reimagination. I will just share that my youngest daughter was 4 months old when I was told my contract would not be renewed at 17 after a decade at that company. And so I was a brand new mother who who had to figure out what it meant to be a mother. Like I had no idea. I was figuring it out. And I had to reimagine what my career could look like. I talk about this in my book, and I talk about this at my TED Talk, and I want to hear everybody else's stories, but I want to give everybody to give a lesson from your own. The lesson that I took away from that moment where I had to reimagine what work looked like for me as a mother for the first time in my life, because I had been on this ladder, kind of like going up a corporate ladder, was immediately to surround myself with other people who were thinking in different ways. That I had been in a corporate ladder with a straight rise to the top, and the higher you got, the higher your floor got in the corporate tower. And the first thing I did was join a co-working space that had some networking, and surrounded myself. And I was like, what is that person doing? What are you working on? How's that going? And it just changed my mindset about what was happening and showed me new possibilities in the world. And in any case, now my daughter is 8 years old, and I have become CEO of a women's community because I really needed and loved that support. Archana, will you share a little bit about your career pivot, your career journey of having kids?
Of course. So previous to Lean In, I was in tech. I spent many years at a large tech company, and then I moved to a small one. And while I was there, I wasn't loving it. It was like a fairly kind of like toxic workplace. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that work could be like this. I had a great experience previous to that. And so I had to find my why, and I just started paying attention to things that I was interested in. And this may sound, it may sound like basic, but for me, like it really wasn't. Like work was work, and work was there. And I was like, same thing. Like, what do I do? How can work be hard? And how can I challenge myself every day? And how can I keep progressing? Like that to me was work. And then I just started paying attention to like, what is it that I was naturally interested in? And for me, it was also women. And so I started doing some work at the organization around women and built up the Women At group. I started a podcast and started interviewing women leaders. And I was like, all right, I'm trying to get to VP. How did you get to VP? Like, let's talk about that. And let's let everybody else kind of listen in on that conversation. I had a kid. And so I was, while I was on maternity leave, I was rethinking like, what do I want to do? Do I want to go back into tech? And then somebody had forwarded me this role at Lean In. And I was like, I'm sorry, did someone like actually talk to me, look at my resume, and then create the perfect job description of everything I could possibly want in a job and then just present it back to me? And so for me, I would have never have, I think, received that kind of forward or even paid close attention to it, because I never thought I wanted to move into the foundation or nonprofit space until I started paying attention to like what my natural interests were. What do I like doing on nights and weekends? And yes, I enjoyed reading gender reports on nights and weekends. And that's what I was doing. I was like, I should pay attention to that. And like maybe go work for the place that like, puts out the gender report. So that's my advice. Is
so
to
whatever
really,
you're reading on the
whatever you're reading, whatever you are interested in.
Yeah.
On your nights and weekends, I promise you there is a job, an industry, a something to just start paying attention to. And you don't have to do it right away. Like for me, it took many, many months, and it was a progression. It probably took a year. If it feels too scary to quit and go do that, you don't have to. But the paying attention and really listening to yourself, I think, is what my biggest piece of advice is.
Sam Edis.
Yeah.
I have 3 pieces of advice. I could go on forever, so I'm just going to pare it down to 3 and spare you. But the first one is just about your personal life, is that I really have never seen any woman reach her full potential who isn't either single or partnered with someone who's a 50%er who supports their dreams.
Yeah.
You cannot reach your full potential if you're partnered with someone who expects you to do an unfair share of the work at home or with childcare. So that's one huge thing. The second thing I would say is that I don't like the word pivot, right? Because I feel like Anne is not a pivot. It was a natural evolution of her career.
Yes.
And even Serena Williams didn't use the word retire. She used the word evolution. I think that she retired, but I like the idea that like, this is part of your story. And the bottom line is it's almost like when you pitch a segment to a TV producer, unless you really tell the story for them, they're not necessarily going to see it as a segment, right? And I'm sorry, I'm going on a segue here, but the idea is that you have to tell your own story, and your story is to connect the dots from one place to the other. So you might not be able to, you might say, oh my gosh, that was a pivot. You went from Google to Lean In, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's not a pivot. It was a natural evolution of your skill set, your interest, and your experience. And so I like the idea that even if you're switching careers, you are able to tell that story in a really cohesive way, because that's how you convince someone to hire you or invest in you or take a chance in you. So I like the idea that you have mastered your story rather than pivot. And then the third thing I will just say is that, and I want to, I don't know if you're going to disagree with me on this, Anne, but the quiet quitting thing, personally, I have a really hard time with it, because I was from the generation, I know I'm old school, but like, you worked harder than the amount you were paid. Like, you worked your ass off because you were going to be rewarded for it one day, because hard work gets noticed. And I still really believe that.
Sam, we're so Gen X. We're so Gen X. We can't help it.
I know, but even if I just believe that, like, you want to do the extra mile, you want to, within reason, obviously, you want to make sure that you're working hard. And now it's actually easier than ever before to get noticed, because if you're loyal and you're hardworking, you are a unicorn. So it's kind of a good thing to do.
Well, let's just all listen to her. I'm going to pull us back a little bit. I'll tell, but you want to know about my story, there's a book about it. Yeah. But I want to pull back and say the thing that I found so fascinating when I interviewed 186 women, surveyed 1,500 more, to find out what were women doing, what were, college-educated professional women doing. That was my question. And what I discovered is many, many, many very senior executive women who didn't have on their resume or LinkedIn a downshift, a pause, a part-time job or whatever. In fact, they buried it and hid it. That to me was really fascinating, because I felt like we weren't being authentic about what was truly happening in our careers and our narratives. And so I love the narrative. What I love now is being authentic. So let's sort of be honest, be truthful, etc. If your company that you're interviewing with doesn't like that, not a great place for you.
Yes.
Go somewhere else, because your talents, as you said so beautifully, and you said, that is out there for you. So I would say know your value. That was what I saw with the women that I found incredibly successful in the research, where this intrinsic drive to pursue what's excellent and ambitious for them. Back to ambition. We've been sold the bill of goods about ambition. We've been told ambition is linear. We've been told the ideal worker model is what ambition is. That is malarkey. It's not. In fact, the women I spoke to were deeply ambitious. It's just that their ambitions weren't exclusively vertical. They were ambitious of having amazing families. They were ambitious of having communities that gave back to each other and they supported and volunteered. They were ambitious to see a society that supported all of us to thrive. To me, that is much more ambitious than I'm marching up the corporate ladder. Yeah. So if we can debunk the narrative of the ideal worker as a success, and I'll just say, I just turned 60. Hello, let's disrupt ageism. My career has never been better. I'm making more money and having more fun than I have in a long, long time. And I would say, let's actually look at this kind of ebb and flow. The data, longitudinal data on women as they contribute shows that there's about a 2-year period right after the children are born when they aren't quite as quote unquote productive. But if you longitudinally look at their careers, they're significantly more productive than men. Yeah. So let's actually look at that and ask that question. That study was done about economists and professors. And I think it's really, we're convinced of something that's not accurate.
I love the idea of covering a lot of ground, right? That it's not that you have to take yourself out of the box that says you are only valuable if you are working in this way and getting outward praise from one manager coming down. Like, take yourself out of that mindset.
Well, it's also career limiting. I realized that my career didn't take off until I looked beyond the company that I was working for. And I realized my career was also horizontal. I had to actually get out there and start networking, back to the networking community, start finding other allies and friends and partners and colleagues and companions beyond. And that kind of horizontal approach allowed everything to rise. I was better at my job because I got input from other people. I was better at my, community. So
We have time for a couple questions. I have a couple here from our friends in the live stream. Thank you. Is there anybody here though? I want to take some questions in the room. We've got any questions? All right. Well, oh yes, ma'am. See, we needed a little quiet.
I was wondering what you think needs to happen for companies to establish new norms around flexibility. As a professional woman with kids, I miss the office. I appreciate remote work because if you need to pop out to get baby formula or do a doctor's appointment, it's not this like FaceTime concern. And I think people that work remotely want that flexibility. But if you don't answer the Slack right away, does that mean you're not doing your job? And we all know we all get the work done, whether you're a man or a woman. But what does it take at the higher levels to reset those norms so that everyone can thrive?
I'll jump in. Let's all get rid of the word flexibility. Let's call it work from anywhere. And work at a time that works for us, right? It's not that, Emily, you're not going to deliver amazing work. It just might not be at this very moment. One of the things I love, I'm a total Slack addict. You're welcome, Slack promo. I actually am very explicit. I'm available from this time. I'm very clear about my away and my present status so that I'm sending the message, right now, I'm not available, but I promise you I will deliver. And, over time, that reputation builds. They know I'm going to deliver with excellence. And so I feel really back to transparency. I'm away at the moment, but I'll be back and I can deliver for you. So let's just think about work from anywhere and, work in a way that works for all of us.
I think I work with a lot of companies in a different way, but I think that what I've seen is that companies are a little slower they're not all in your boat yet, right? This is like the pie in the sky vision that we have. However, I do think that there is a sense in many companies now that it's results driven, right? Like these are the deliverables. They're not able to say, I'm watching you work all day long, so I know you're getting it done. Instead, there's a much more clear understanding of what the deliverables are and can you meet them? But that said, there is an expectation that you're going to be available during certain normal work hours. So even though you might be picking up your child and coming back, like in my company, it's my understanding that everyone's working during the day, but it's totally flexible in terms of they can run out to do errands, or they can go meet someone if they have to for lunch that they want, that they've wanted to see, or they can go visit their sister in Alabama and work from there. I mean, it is definitely a different world, but I think we have to be very specific about what the deliverables are. So I think that's helped.
You're so right. What I'm finding fascinating is that we actually haven't trained or taught our managers how to manage. And so there's a whole movement now and a growth around kind of learning and development. Yeah. And one of the things we're teaching them is how to set accountability and expectations and how to be really clear on what deliverables are and what success looks like.
Yeah. What about from the company point of view with the companies you're working with?
The companies I'm working with, I think we're working less on the flexibility side and again, really more on how do you create workplace cultures that work for women. So I think flexibility is a really important piece of it. But I think to build on what I was saying earlier, I think part of it is like, how are you tracking? What are your goals around that? I think the second is that how do you engage all employees as change agents, right? And so it's not just like fix the women. It's really around how are you teaching everybody at the organization? Like, what does a microaggression look like? What does allyship look like? What are the actions that you can take? I think it was something is like less than half of the companies that we interviewed provided any kind of training on microaggressions, on bias, and on allyship. So of course men don't know what to do because they're not getting trained and they're asking kind of all of the right questions. And so as a company, like I do think it's your responsibility to bring in some training to help reset the norms. And so while as a company you're working on the policies, you're working to kind of reset the culture, I think it's also very important to be able to support your women. So what do your policies and your programs look like? How can you, is it mentorship or sponsorship or circles, whatever it is, what do you have in place to support the women while you're trying to systematically change what's happening at all of the other levels?
Archana, you developed and Lean In has developed a phenomenal set of tools around breaking unconscious bias, et cetera. And they're so accessible. LeanIn.org,
Thank you.
go check them out. I share them
Thanks,
with our
Lisa.
clients all the time. They're
Nice.
efficient, they're well done. It just, you don't understand what this is? Here's your 3-minute clue.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Really.
I was actually going to ask that question in terms of, so you both touched upon a very similar thread of how we can support the change. So I was actually going to ask what are some resources or some of your best books or people that you follow or
Work, pause, thrive. The Pie Life. For the millennials out there, they should get The Big Life. That's my book.
Mhm.
Lean In.
Mhm. Mhm.
What else? What are other resources?
Well, it depends on what you're trying to understand, right? There's-
resources for what?
yeah.
The training of the managers so that they can for the accountability piece, which I agree, because the workplace has shifted so much that is the way we do need to measure now, but people don't necessarily they haven't learned necessarily those measuring tools or how to have their people measure for themselves and to observe that. And so specifically that part that you talked about.
Call prismwork.com. That's what we're doing right now. We're doing all kinds of programs to help senior managers and leaders really understand how do you lead, how do you manage right now, and it's fundamentally different than it was 4 years ago. But all of the examples, Lean In really has amazing resources.
I can just double click on 2 of them just to get some specifics.
Yeah.
One is called 50 Ways to Fight Bias,
Yes.
which is basically, we articulate over 100 specific instances of how bias shows up in the workplace. And so it doesn't have to be like a crazy long training. You could literally just read one bias a day if you wanted to, just be like, what does it mean to have meeting bias? What does it mean to have bias in hiring and promotions? How can you put all of your hiring managers through that so they understand what they're looking for? So that's one. And then we do a 4-hour allyship at work training. And that is one that we've gotten incredibly positive feedback from companies around. This is what we need. And it's allyship for everybody to help kind of ground on what does allyship even mean? What is the definition? What are the experiences? And then how can I show up as an ally in the workplace? So those are just 2 specifics I wanted to add. Yeah.
We could have this conversation again and again. And I hope we do. I hope we bring this conversation to women across the country in so many new ways so that we can really like drill down. But we've covered so much ground here today. I thank you all for spending your time with us. I thank you all on the live stream. I thank you, WeWork. I thank you, Ladder. I thank you, amazing human beings, Lisa and Sam and Archana. That's our time. Thank you. Thank you.